Flagler County is about to turn 100 years old, and to get a sense of its history, one must know about the men who policed it. When Flagler was formed, it was tightly segregated and densely rural. During its first 50 years, it was policed by a string of good old boy sheriffs, and few had an easy go of it. Flagler's first sheriff, E.W. Johnston, was appointed in 1917, and later won the first ever sheriff's election. Then he lost his next three. Perry Hall was in office for 20 months before being killed during a one-person raid of a moonshining shack in Roy, a black settlement in the far northwest corner of the county near Palatka. That spawned several weeks of Wild West-like violence during which one of Hall's deputies was slain. Then his killer was slain, and Hall's killer was tracked down in Georgia and fatally shot in the back. Florida's governor had to appoint the next sheriff of Flagler, and it wouldn't be the last time. Bill Williams was tapped to complete Hall's term, and during the following 12 years, 3 men wore the star. That group included E.W. Johnston, who pulled a Grover Cleveland and came back to regain his seat. The sheriff who broke the one-term-only streak was William Henry Wells, who won 3 elections. Some longtime residents remember Wells, and some favorable stories about him still circulate.
Story in my family about Sheriff Henry Wells is when my uncle Brady came back from World War II. He was full of shrapnel. He'd lost, I think, 3 fingers on one of his hands. Sheriff Henry Wells was the person who helped him through all of the bad memories.
After Wells came Buddy McKnight, the son of the county's 4th sheriff. It was the only time in Flagler history that a son of a sheriff was elected to his father's old seat. After McKnight's lone term, voters elected Homer Brooks, a popular sheriff who, like Wells, won 3 elections. His 3rd term was cut short after just a few months, when he collapsed and died of a heart attack near the front of the old courthouse. The governor would appoint Ace Drummond as interim sheriff. The eventual permanent sheriff was Zip Edmondson, who subsequently won 4 elections and held on to the office for almost 16 years. Edmondson was considered the last of the good old boys. The seeds of Flagler's population boom were planted around 1970, when Palm Coast was established. Pretty soon, Flagler's native residents would be significantly outnumbered by those from the north, who migrated to one of Florida's most coveted new developments. Edmondson's grip on the office was loosening because of the county's demographic transformation, but those who worked for him remained ferociously loyal.
In 1978, I was hired by Sheriff Zip Edmondson. He was a wonderful man. He was always there for us deputies. He was just a really sincere individual. It was not about politicking all the time like so many of these people do.
Edmondson's opponent in the 1980 sheriff's race hailed from Lynchburg, Virginia. His name was Dan Bennett. He carried Palm Coast, and that carried him to victory.
Well, we sort of thought it was going to happen, and it did happen. Some people told him along the line that he was going to lose, and he didn't think so, but it happened, and it happened because all the new people came in that didn't know him, didn't know his character. They were just told by the other people running for sheriff against him that he needed to be replaced, and that was absolutely not true.
Bennett only served 2 years. The governor suspended him following a litany of allegations that included groping a woman on a patrol boat, covering up an illegal property search, deciding to violate a court order to destroy pornographic material collected during an old investigation, and receiving financial kickbacks from a local auto dealership.
The first 5 years I was kind of mad at myself for sulking a little bit. Then I woke up and said, hey, maybe if somebody else had done the same thing to them, but I brought a new way of law enforcement to the county, and they didn't want to accept it right then. The majority of the people wanted it. They voted for it. And law enforcement was here back then was a good old buddy old boy system, and I knew it had to change. I'd seen it in action, and I'd seen it in inaction when they did take action when they're supposed to.
Bennett, to this day, insists he was innocent and says he was a victim of the last great power move made by Flagler's old guard.
I was politically savvy enough to know how to win the election against someone that never been in a general election, but keeping it was a little bit different. That's the part I failed on, was not knowing how to protect myself politically.
After Bennett's ouster, which became official after a unanimous Florida Senate vote, Buddy Phillips, a former Suwannee County sheriff, was appointed by the governor to be interim Flagler sheriff. The governor eventually chose Flagler Beach Police Chief Bob McCarthy to be Bennett's permanent replacement. McCarthy was the first Flagler County sheriff born north of the Mason-Dixon line. McCarthy served for close to 17 years, making him the longest tenured sheriff in the county's history. As Flagler enjoyed tremendous growth, that added a tremendous strain to the deputies who had to contend with an increasing crime rate. During most of his time as sheriff, McCarthy was well respected.
Sheriff McCarthy was a great guy. I loved McCarthy. He was the type of guy that if you had a problem, he would confront the problem right up front. He would not let it linger. He would take care of the problem and you would move on. He was a cop's cop. He was a cop himself, and he knew the job, and he didn't mind going out there showing people that he knew how to do the job.
What was his personality like?
He just had a kind spirit. It was always kind with him.
Not everybody thought so. By the time McCarthy ran for his fourth re-election bid, his popularity had taken a nosedive. Along came a former prosecutor and municipal attorney from Long Island, Jim Manfrey. When he won the 2000 election, it was a stunning development, considering Manfrey had never worn a police uniform and had only lived in Flagler full-time for about a year. Not only that, but McCarthy was more of a visceral sheriff as opposed to a by-the-book sheriff. That meant the challenges facing Manfrey were extremely daunting.
The whole process was unusual. The fact that I'd gotten elected in a county where I just lived for a very short period of time, and that we had to overcome all these obstacles of a sheriff who was uncooperative, an agency that was in shambles, no upper management existed, they had all left. So I really had to create an organization out of nothing. There was nothing there.
Manfrey's own popularity waned during his first term. He lost his 2004 bid in the Democratic primary. The general election that year was won by Don Fleming, a New York native and a retired New Jersey police chief. Fleming, who was an Army veteran, was the first Republican elected Flagler sheriff. He would go on to serve 8 years. Fleming lost his seat to Manfrey, who, like E.W. Johnston before him, launched a successful comeback. Manfrey has overseen a newly expanded jail and the construction of a new operations center. The county's population is surging again. Recently, it exceeded 100,000. 35 years earlier, it was barely more than 10,000. The challengers in the 2016 Flagler Sheriff's race includes a very familiar face. Don Fleming wants another crack at the star. He is the one who is challenging Manfrey this time. He wants to helm the sheriff's office as it enters its next growth phase.
It's a hidden oasis. It's one part of Florida that hasn't been totally discovered yet, but from what I hear, according to Forbes magazine, by 2020 it's going to be the fastest growing community in the United States all over again. Right now we're at 103,000. I think they project to have 220 by 2023, something like that.
Manfrey and Fleming have company in the 2016 race. Lots of it. 9 total men are gunning for the office. Good fortune has been elusive to nearly all of the men who have been Flagler sheriff. If the next election winner finishes out his term without hardship, he will have achieved a rare feat.